All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the show. I'm going to be having a discussion with a guest today. Before we get into it, I'm just going to give him a chance to introduce himself and his channel and what he does here. I have put a link to his YouTube channel in the description for this video. So go ahead, Philip.
Yes, my name is Phillip Kornelis Aman. I'm a Christian philosopher who debates cosmogony in favor for God. I'm here to debate Jefferson. I've got a YouTube channel, Phillip Kornelis Aman. Thanks.
Okay. So I guess we'll get right into it. This is sort of your kind of take on things, so I'll let you get us started. You said that you debate cosmogony, so I'm thinking you have a special interest in origin of the universe, and if I'm getting your position right, it is absolutely required that God must have caused it, right?
Yeah, energy and matter cannot move on its own. It requires an ethereal cause to go from zilch locomotion to consistent movement. If you reject that, your only alternative is that energy and matter consist of life from the very beginning. And this comports with the first law of motion. Newton's first law of motion is that energy and matter at inertia will remain at inertia or animated unless acted upon by another particular. So I need to clarify your worldview. So is energy and matter eternal? Is stars eternal in your worldview? Are stars eternal in your worldview?
No.
Okay, so with all that energy and matter, was that finite in size with a curvature, or was it infinite in size without a curvature?
I don't know what you mean by a curvature, but there's implications for both. So it could be one or the other. I don't know which one is more likely, because I know that with some you get different. You get to answer certain questions, but it raises other issues, and likewise for the other explanations. So whether the universe is finite or infinite, I don't think any physicist knows. I certainly don't.
Well, to elaborate, finite in size, meaning that all that energy and matter has a curvature to it. Just to expand on that, outside the curvature of that finite in size energy and matter would be a second particular. And to elaborate on infinite in size energy and matter, that means there is no outside particular. All that exists in that worldview is energy and matter. And this is a true dichotomy, what I am proposing here.
Are you sure about that?
Yes, this comports with the law of polarity, that there are always an opposite to a particular, and the law of excluded middle, that it's either A or not A. So to elaborate on the law of excluded middle, it's either finite in size or it's not finite in size.
Mm-hmm.
Not finite in size means infinite in size or omnipresent. So which one of those two do you hold to?
I don't hold to either.
Well, would you agree there isn't a third option?
That there is no third option of that? Yeah. Again, I'm not a physicist, so I'm not entirely certain.
No, but this logically follows that there are only two options. It's either finite.
Hang on. It logically follows that you are saying that you are asserting that there's only two options, but we're still talking about very theoretical physics, and we're both lay people. So, well, if we're going to talk about whether or not a universe is finite in size or infinite in size, especially if we're going to talk about things like the origins of it, right? Where we really don't, physicists don't really have a clear idea about, you can't see the very moment at the beginning of the singularity, how things touched off. I'm just a little bit uncertain as to what is it important to you that it be settled definitively?
Well, like we exist today, so it's either one of the two. But I take the position that energy and matter had a beginning, and it came into existence in a finite size.
Okay.
And that God who is ethereal manipulated all that energy and matter.
How?
What do you mean, how?
How did he do it? By what means?
Are you asking the mechanism that God uses to manipulate energy and matter?
Yes.
Well, in consciousness, when you can close your eyes and visualize an image, that image in your mind, you can manipulate it to your liking. So because
our reality is God's dream.
Well, we are on the we are debating a God in general. So,
well, we're not really debating. We're just discussing something. This isn't really a debate. We haven't done it. This is a far cry from anything like a formal debate. We're just having a discussion about these kinds of issues. So, now in terms of your questions and stuff, if the God that you're positing is a sort of kind of classic Christian God, omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient, creator of absolutely anything and everything, then of course that explains the origin of the universe, because it explains the origin of absolutely everything. God created, you're just asserting that he created reality. How did you determine that God with those attributes created this universe? How did you conclude that?
I can grant you that we are living in God's consciousness for the sake of this debate, because we are discussing a God in general.
Well, it's big of you that you can grant that to me, but that's what you put forward. The example that you gave, the mechanism that God can use to create the universe, is similar to me closing my eyes and imagining a scenario that I can manipulate it just utilizing my imagination. Are you that's when I asked you that question, you got a little bit dicey on that. Are you saying that reality in totality is no different than God just dreaming us up?
Well, look, are you granting me that God exists for this discussion?
For this section of the discussion, sure, yeah.
Well, I take the position that the God of the Bible created the universe outside of himself, making him ad infinitum, but I'll grant you that we are living in God's consciousness. So if you take that position that we are living in God's consciousness, well, then that mechanism is easily explained by closing our eyes and visualizing an image.
But when God does that, it has an effect on a physical reality that he is not a part of.
Well, when you visualize an image, is that energy and matter in your mind?
I mean, it's a physical act, yeah.
Yeah, and
I don't know that I'm using thinking power if I'm consciously trying to dream up something, trying to imagine a scenario. So yeah, I mean, that's matter in motion, and energy is being used to think it.
Yeah, and it takes an immaterial thought to produce a material result.
But both of the things that I did when I came up with it, they were both material, right? I mean, the energy is immaterial, right? But the matter is very much real. I'm a contingent being in this universe. I exist in this universe. I can have those thoughts. I don't understand a God being that doesn't exist in this reality that dreams up things like I do. The only difference is when he does it, he can make them real in a physical universe. But you also have made the claim he transcends that space and time. So he's not in that universe.
But if you say that the cause for a material image in your mind is prior to that is another material cause, well then how do you know that without appealing to another material cause?
Well, in the case of being the case of being just a living being in reality, you can't.
Well, that's the only explanation. There isn't a third option. An immaterial cause
And I just
produces a.
I gave you that. I mean, what do you want me to do? You want me to commit to the idea that like you can just that matter just exists and it just goes back in? You know, I'm not an infinitist, so I don't believe in pure infinity. But at the same time, I'm not a foundationalist either. I don't think that there has to be some kind of like ultimate thing grounding everything.
Hang on. What do you mean? Why do you deny pure infinity? Well,
Why?
what is
I'm
pure
not. I'm
infinity to
not
you?
denying infinity. I'm denying that stance, right? You've got like the trilemma: coherentism, foundationalism, or infinitism. Those three.
But is that in relation to God's infinite size or his omnipotence, his infinite power?
Well, that's the thing, right? I mean, if you're talking about something, if we're talking about a being with infinite anything, then it's outside of our capacity to imagine, right?
But the brute fact is, one infinite exists. That logically follows because you can't have a finite in size particular.
Except a
Because
God, right?
no, God is infinite in size,
Okay, but
not
if
contingent.
then how are you squaring that circle? Are you just asserting that it's a special case for him? Because that very much sounds
No,
just like special pleading.
it's a brute fact. To elaborate on this, you don't need an explanation for his infinite size. It just logically follows is that there is always an opposite to a particular, and using the law of excluded middle, it's either finite in size or it's not finite in size.
But you
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 can't.
keep you keep using that as if you've excluded that they're mutually exclusive, right? If you're just talking about finite versus infinite, yep, sure, fine, I get that. But what we're talking about in this case are two totally separate entities, and I think you would agree with this. There's either a finite or an infinite universe, right? And then there's either a finite or an infinite God. The same question that we can ask about the universe, we can ask of God. It doesn't follow that even if the universe is finite, that it came from an infinite being. It could have just come from a finite being that came from other finite beings that ultimately originated in another infinite being somewhere way down the line. The idea of that God doesn't track. You can still end up with the same problem. You're just asserting that this creator being is infinite, so you can put a pin in that and say that you've solved the problem. But you haven't. You've just stopped imagining.
Hang on, to ask you a clarifying question. In your worldview, is energy and matter infinite in size?
Again, I don't know.
There isn't a third option. It's a
If there isn't a third option, then why are physicists not why are they undecided about whether or not the universe is finite or infinite? How have you ruled that it's going to be one or the other when experts who study physics don't know? How have you ruled them
well,
out?
that's I don't know what physicists you're appealing to, but not all physicists deny God.
I didn't say anything about whether they acknowledged God or denied him. I'm talking about the fact that in physics, it is not a done deal whether the universe is finite or infinite. There are different theories, and different physicists take different tacks on them. They'll have maybe a stronger position on the universe is infinite, or they have a stronger position on no, the universe is finite. But that is not a settled idea. So you presenting me with, well, it's got to be one or the other. You tell me which one you think it is, and how does that affect your worldview? I'm not a physicist. I haven't decided which one I think is more relevant or more likely. And since physicists are still wrestling with it, I don't feel that I have to like pick one of those. Because either one of them for me is just going to be a guess made out of ignorance or my own personal preferences, which isn't going to get me anywhere.
That's why we have to explore both options together. If you go down the route of energy and matter being infinite in size, you still require an antecedent, peripheral, and omnipresent immaterial God to get.
Why would you, why do you need a God for that? You haven't explained. Let's say that all of those other properties are true, then you connect it to a God. It needs to have all these other things, and also those things need to be the property of this other thing called God. You're taking some qualities that you believe are necessary in order for a creator to create a universe, and then wrapping it up with the title, it's a God. That gives you the ability to later shoehorn in any other properties that you need. You haven't demonstrated that this is anything more than just you asserting that it must be this way because it solves certain problems for you. But you haven't conclusively proven anything about it.
Well, in your worldview, is gravity tangible or intangible?
By tangible, do you mean it's something that we can apprehend?
Yeah, something that you could see, touch.
We can measure it. We can feel its effects.
Yes, and that would be energy and matter.
Right.
And so then this violates the first law of motion, is that energy and matter cannot move on its own without an immaterial cause.
I'm not okay, hang on. I'm not denying the possibility of an immaterial cause. What I don't think is necessary is to say that if there was an immaterial cause, it therefore follows that immaterial cause was conscious. How are you getting that?
Because for that ethereal particular to be moving on its own would consist of life. If that's because that logic.
How did you arrive at that conclusion?
The same logic applies. If matter is moving on its own, internally it consists of life. Do
you not understand that, like, in terms of what we're talking about, like matter and energy being in motion, that things are often being pushed and pulled at the same time?
Hang on, say that again.
In terms of matter and energy, like you and I, right? I could stand up from the chair that I'm currently sitting in and walk through my apartment, right? While I'm doing that, this planet is spinning in a solar system that's in a galaxy that is in a state of free fall. All of these bodies being pulled and pushing on each other, being held together by gravitational forces, many of which are still not fully understood. So the idea that whatever you're trying to state here, that like, no, if movement happens, it must have been initiated by something, by a conscious thing. That's not necessarily the case. We live in a dynamic system. We know that. It's not like the Big Bang happened and the solar systems, the galaxies that are here are just sitting here. We know that we are still in that expanse, and the things that are furthest away from us are accelerating even further away from us at a faster rate. So we're already in a dynamic environment where energy and matter are constantly, in play. So I don't understand this concept that you're bringing to it, like, well, if this stuff starts, it had to have a thought to it.
I'm assuming you're alluding to a chemical reaction, that you have energy falling down and colliding with a second structure of energy and matter. But you have to account for the gap. In between the gap of those two particulars would be immaterial and antecedent and omnipotent to secure those particulars of energy and matter, for the immaterial to bring these two particulars together to get a chemical reaction. So that's a God. In between that gap is a God.
You said all that to just go back and say that it must have an intention, right? If I take a grape, slather it up in cooking oil, and put it on a greasy plate in a microwave, and hit cook, it will move across the plate. As it cooks, it'll release gas and be pushed, and it will propel itself along because it's just chemical reactions, right? So when you're trying to say that whatever this is as a universe is just it has been put into motion by something, and then you assert whatever did that must have been consciously doing it. How have you ruled out that the forces that were happening at that time, which physicists don't totally understand, didn't incidentally create what we have? Why are you insisting that it's a consciousness?
Hang on, there's still one more issue, is that you have the energy and matter falling down, but why wasn't the bottom half falling down also? That puts you back to the immaterial keeping energy and matter together. And for the immaterial to interact with matter requires an omnipotence.
So gravity. Wait. Gravity is immaterial. Are you saying that gravity requires God's? It requires God.
But outside the universe, it would be immaterial. So logically,
How does
outside
okay,
the universe is gravity. It would be immaterial, and gravity is immaterial. So therefore,
so gravity is outside the universe?
No, the immaterial. Gravity.
You just said that the immaterial
assigned,
was outside the universe. What are you talking about?
No, gravity is just an assigned name to
An immaterial force.
Yes. So, and logically,
and I asked you, does it require consciousness to work?
Yes, because you need an unmoved mover.
Why do you need that?
Because that immaterial particular is moving internally on its own, not contingent on anything. That secures God's aseity because he is infinite in size. So the gravity is immaterial, and outside the universe is immaterial. So what logically follows is that outside the universe is also is omnipresent in this universe. So
that doesn't make any sense, nor does that follow from what you just said before. You wouldn't be able to speculate about what was outside the universe, and if you and what you have speculated is outside the universe is some kind of enormous consciousness, a God that can will a physical reality into being by thinking it.
This logically follows outside the physical universe is the immaterial.
How do you know that?
What third option is there? If the universe is
how have you ruled out that what's outside this universe isn't another physical reality, just one that we haven't encountered before, one that we don't totally understand? How have you ruled it out?
Hang on, so are you alluding to a second universe outside this universe?
A second universe, a marble universe, some kid's basement in an alien underworld? Who knows? How have you ruled out any other? What you're saying is, here's the universe, and it's got the physical stuff in it, and it's got matter, and it's got energy, and all of these things banging around. Outside of this must be some kind of great infinite nothingness where God is, or what God is, right?
But even if you make that claim of a second universe, you still have to account for the gap. So that gap would be immaterial and omnipotent to secure all these universes.
Right. You could just say that it was a conscious universe.
Are you appealing to pantheism?
For the purposes of this part of the debate, I'm saying that, yes, why couldn't somebody come along and say that pantheism solves this? Well, why does it need to be a God that made deals with ancient Israelites and hated Canaanites and sent his son? I'm assuming that you are a Christian.
Yes.
So you don't just believe in a God, you believe in that God. And that God is the same one from those narratives. He's the one that is this thing that's outside our universe, dreaming up a very physical universe that we exist in. Our reality is dependent on that being. Yeah?
But look, I can grant you pantheism.
No, I'm asking you, is that what you think?
What was your question again?
Do you believe that the God of the Bible that is described in those narratives, Hebrew Bible and New Testament, is the same transcendent, outside our universe space being that created all of reality and everything that we experience within it?
Yes, but we can jump into theology, but we are debating a God in general. So I can grant you pantheism, but then that jumps from cosmogony straight to theology. So then you have to grant me that God exists for us to move over to theology. Do you grant me that God exists for me to debunk pantheism?
So you want to debunk pantheism? Do you want me to acknowledge that pantheism is a possibility, or do you want me to say that pantheism, the universe is God? What are you asking me to agree to?
Well, just to clarify, in relation to pantheism, is in that worldview, do you invoke an immaterial attribute to the universe, or is it strictly energy and matter?
Depends on the school of pantheism that's being brought up. So I'm sure that there are some pantheists that would think that the universe has some extra special force. Maybe they're neutral monists. They believe in a physical and an ideal, but they also believe in kind of that third, that there's that missing piece out there. Maybe they believe that it's all physical, but the universe is still, in a sense, of being a living thing.
So even if you claim an all material in relation to pantheism, like I can't grant you a God who only consists of energy and matter, because, just to give you an analogy, that a pool of water cannot make ice cubes inside of itself. It requires an outside immaterial cause. So if you claim pantheism, but before the formation of stars and planets, that false god of energy and matter to make finite in size structures inside of itself, well, you have to insert an immaterial attribute,
which we have in our very real universe. We have immaterial forces acting on each other all the time. And when I asked you if those things required a God, there was one thing I probably didn't bring up that I think should be specified. I know that you believe that gravity required God to come into existence, but do you think that gravity is being actively managed by the God you believe in?
No, in my worldview, gravity doesn't exist, but I can grant you.
What?
No, but gravity is just the immaterial. Like,
that's okay. That's all.
So, yeah, the immaterial is the prime mover for stars and planets.
Okay, so are you saying then that immaterial? I'm saying that there's this immaterial force called gravity. You're just denying gravity, but you're saying that those immaterial forces are God. Yes?
But hang on, are we still in the worldview of pantheism?
No, I'm asking about your worldview. I'm trying to narrow down what you said. When I asked the question about God being necessary for gravity, I wasn't clear in the question, because I know that you believe that everything within this universe requires God for its existence. But what I asked was, you keep identifying gravity as just an immaterial force. You don't believe in gravity per se. Is that an answer to my question then in the affirmative, that you believe that immaterial force is in fact God acting in the here and now in the universe?
Well, the belief behind gravity is that it's omnipresent here on Earth and that it's immaterial, so that would comport with a God. However, I don't take the position that the abstract thought of gravity exists. However, I don't deny an immaterial omnipotence securing all energy and matter. But if you're going down the route of pantheism,
okay,
gravity,
no, forget pantheism. I'm trying to understand your frame of reference, your worldview. Do you think that force, those immaterial forces that we can measure in the here and now, are God or part of God?
Hang on, is your question, can we detect God in the here and now?
You and I both agree that we can identify that there is matter in our universe and that there is energy, and that energy is an immaterial force, right? That, put very simply and very crudely. We both acknowledge, for whatever we want to call it gravity, call it whatever you want to refer to it as, that is an immaterial force that is acting on matter all the time, and even energy. What I'm asking you, because you have stated that you don't believe that gravity is a thing, but you have acknowledged these immaterial forces in our universe. I am asking you, do you believe that immaterial force acting on our reality is God? Or part of God's eminence, part of his nature, part of his something? Is it a component of him?
But I don't take the position. I don't classify energy as material.
I didn't say that you did. I didn't say that you did. I'm asking you, do you believe the immaterial forces acting within our reality, in our universe, are God? Is that your belief?
Yes.
Okay. So you believe that if we are coming up with theories about gravity and how that affects the rotation of our Earth, the solar system, galaxies, the expansion of the universe that we can observe with a telescope, any of these kinds of energy forces, is God consciously in action?
Yeah.
So he's throwing the galaxies apart. He is that energy, or at least at the very least, it's a component of him.
Yeah.
Okay. And you think that, and that's how he's sustaining things? Now, is that energy occurring within the universe, or is it occurring outside the universe?
Well, it would be in the universe and outside.
But you just said that an inside, a puddle of water can't form ice cubes on its own. It needs outside energy. But that energy that you're talking about, that you're attributing to God, is inside this universe, acting on it all the time. So we've already got a contradiction between some of your analogies and what you actually believe.
But no, with the pool of water analogy, that's in relation to infinite in size matter. That matter cannot move to make finite in size particulars. So water cannot make multiple ice cubes inside of itself without changing its whole self into a different form.
Okay, hang on a second. Do you believe that matter is finite?
Finite in size, yes.
Do you believe that energy is finite or infinite?
Energy is finite in size.
Yes. What do you mean it's finite in size?
Well, energy and matter are one and the same, so
exactly. So if you have a being that is capable of exerting an infinite amount of energy, it holds to reason that it can create an infinite amount of matter.
Well, I have to bring the Bible into this. Is that
the ultimate physics textbook? That doesn't make any sense, my man. Well, how is the Bible going to inform us about that? You're the one who's trying that. You're trying to establish these kinds of things, and I'm trying to. And we've been talking about God in general. In fact, you actually got after me about that when I tried to get you to clarify the God of the Bible as a narrative thing, and you're just like, no, we're talking about a God in general. Now, when I've asked you this question, now we need to refer to the Bible specifically. Why? The formulation that you have come up with is that matter and energy, for whatever reason, are finite in size, quote unquote, which I still think is an awkward way of putting things. But if you believe that a being that transcends this universe can exert an infinite amount of energy, because it is omnipotent and unlimited, it's an infinite being, then it stands to reason it can create an infinite amount of matter. So the original positions that you brought up about matter being finite or energy being finite do not hold, especially when you have gone on to claim that the immaterial forces, this energy in action within our universe, is also part of that God.
Yeah.
So what exactly is your point?
The God of the Bible meets the prerequisites to be ad infinitum because he created a finite in size planet Earth and he could expand it into infinity. And so
it's only finite because he decided it would be, not because of actual physical constraints from him. So why would you give me what you believe is a true dichotomy, finite or infinite, physical, immaterial. When if you've got a God, it doesn't actually have to be either one of those things in any real limited way. It can be all the energy and all the matter all the time.
You need an eternal, ethereal consciousness moving internally for there to be a shift from 0 to 1 in time. Time is the measurement of energy and matter. So you need a particular outside of time with a consciousness to choose to create energy and matter, with an omnipotence to not only create energy and matter, but to stretch out energy and matter.
That doesn't make, again, now you've introduced another component, right? Now we have a component of time. How does this being, which exists transcendently of the universe it's created, why is it dependent? Why does it's required to create space and time for our universe, but it exists outside of those two things? So
Yes.
why are space and time reliant on a being that has nothing to do with space and time? I'm not seeing the connection. The only connection that you're making is that something with thought had to do it. It had to be made by a maker. That's all I'm hearing you assert. I'm not hearing you make a connection about how it did it. And when I ask you for particulars as to the how God does it, you just go back to his properties like, well, it can basically do anything by definition. That is not an adequate explanation or a convincing one.
Now, I take the position that God created energy and matter outside of himself, and then he could stretch it out into infinity.
What does that mean, outside of himself? Where is he?
It says,
and if he's the energy interacting with this universe, he's not outside the universe. He's very much in it.
No, he's not. He's not. He doesn't consist of energy.
But that energy is part of him.
No, he created.
You don't believe in gravity. You believe that's God consciously working on the machinations of this universe, but he exists outside of it.
No, I don't take the position that energy and matter is eternal, that it had a beginning contingent on God who created energy and matter, and that he can stretch it out into infinity. But if you reject that, your only option left is an infinite universe.
It's not.
Cosmos.
It really isn't. Again, I'm going to ask you this: how have you made that mutually exclusive? Other than to assert that there must be a consciousness that transcends all this stuff that could make it thus and so.
For something to be moving internally consists of life.
Again, movement doesn't require the initiation of a conscious being. Do you not? Is the earth alive?
No, but it's all.
But it's moving.
The movement, yeah, but it's all contingent on an outside cause.
Yeah, because you believe that God is the kid that set the marbles in motion. But you haven't been able to demonstrate that that's actually how things have been put into play. We can see non-living things in a perpetual state of motion. The universe is in a perpetual state of motion. And if you're going to give me some analogy about, well, when you move, isn't it thoughts or impulses coming from your brain? Not all of the movement of my body is being controlled by my brain. Because part of the movement of my body is the fact that I'm spinning on a celestial rock. Right now, you and I both are. Moving at the same speed, rotating at the same rate of speed around a sun. We're already in motion. So your example is incredibly insipid. So please try to do something else with that.
For a particular who is intangible and to be moving internally would consist of life.
What does that mean what do you mean by a particular? What do you mean by intangible in relation to that particular? And why is life now dependent? How does it follow from those two things? Please define those terms as you're using them.
The intangible meaning ethereal, outside energy and matter. So not contingent on energy and matter.
But you haven't demonstrated that that's even possible. It's one. You haven't demonstrated that there is one, and we can't demonstrate that one that's even a possibility. So when you say particular, what do you mean by particular?
But particular just meaning a thing, an item.
Okay, but when you say that, I'm wondering if you've gotten into enough metaphysics where you think like it's a particular demonstrating like a property.
Yeah, you could call it a property.
Okay, so you believe in that kind of instantiation kind of thing?
Well, yeah.
Okay, so like if I drive a red car and you have a red ball, the red that they're tapping into it's the same red. Is that what you think?
The red is just an assigned name to energy and matter, but in relation to an immaterial particular to be moving internally, that consists of life, consistent
not
ambulation
always.
for there
No,
to be.
No, it doesn't. It does not always assume life. You seem to be equating initiated movement by a conscious thing with the movement of all things.
We are
Those are
moving.
not the same.
We are moving right now from the inside. So
the inside of what?
Well, our vessels. We are moving from the inside.
By vessels, do you mean bodies? This sounds like we're getting into the theological now.
Yes, our bodies.
Okay.
/ vessels.
When you mean movement, do you mean the movement that we initiate consciously, or do you mean all movement?
All movements.
So the critters that live in my intestine that eat food, snack on stuff, produce gas, burp, and fart, they move. That isn't something that I'm consciously putting into play. I have no control over those things unless I were to drink a glass of wine and kill a bunch of them. If my immune system attacks a virus, the movement happening there has nothing to do with my conscious initiation of movement. In fact, in both of those cases, those aren't even really controlled by my brain.
But just staying on point, if you extrapolate that back to an unmoved mover, that unmoved mover has to consist of life from the very beginning.
I understand that you're asserting that, but you still haven't shown how you're getting from one to the other than just asserting this is a thing, an unmoved mover, it's infinite, it's always existed, so no trouble there, and it can do all this stuff. Hands dusted off, end of problem. But you can't show it or demonstrate it. The only thing that you're doing is trying to say that, well, I'm arguing that it would be impossible for this reality to exist without something like that at play. And you can't demonstrate that either, because there's lots of arguments in physics about how this universe started. And there's lots of open questions about it that would frankly probably curl your nose hairs if you started getting into them. They're frankly crazy. I can't imagine why you would need to postulate something as childish as a galactic king thing that can just do anything or do whatever's maximally great or anything versus actually trying to solve the hard problems of what these physics might lead to in a very real physical world. But then again,
I can
let me ask you something. You are a flat earther, right?
Hang on, yeah, but look, there's two points there.
So now we're starting to get into. Okay, so I'm surprised that you don't think that the universe is like a boat or something. I mean, if you think that the Earth is flat, we can probably wrap this up here really quick.
Hang on, no, there are two things. You're asking how can I demonstrate God's eternal attributes? How he's an unmoved mover?
Can you demonstrate those without appealing to the very universe that we're trying to? You can. What about him can you appeal to without appealing to creation itself?
When we have dreams, when we are in a dream, we are already moving in that dream. We don't question ourselves how we got into that dream. God just is. He is not contingent on anything.
Do you think that a dream state is happening independent of our physical reality?
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't? So if we can measure, if we can put people in scanners and show very physically real brain changes, and they know that those brain changes mean not only that they're dreaming, but they can also indicate certain types of dreams. So it's a very real physical thing that's happening within the brain, and it's contingent upon the universe that the dreamer is in. So again, how is the fact that people experience dreams connected to, by necessity, a creator being?
Well, no. Well, to elaborate, well, a lucid dream, a dream that you know that you're a part of, you don't question the very first movements. You just are moving in that lucid dream, and so we can apply this to God's eternal attribute: is that He is an unmoved mover. And if you the only alternative you have is that, well, did God have a beginning? God did not have a beginning. By using a reductio ad absurdum method, is that absolute nothingness as a starting point is a fallacy, because if absolute nothingness created an infinite structure of matter, it still requires an outside cause. If absolute nothingness created God, well, that's a fallacy, because God consists of over two infinite particulars. He consists of an immaterial particular and a physical particular. So for those two particulars to come into existence simultaneously of each other is a contradiction, because A is B at the same time A is not B. And then using the law of excluded middle, this puts God to being eternal. There isn't a third option.
If God is infinitely physical, right? If that's a particular that He is, then everything physical about the universe is God.
No, well, His omnipotence, like He is immaterial as a starting point.
But then you said He was physical. How can, if you want to hold to the law of excluded middle, how is He both immaterial and infinitely physical at the same time?
No, what I'm saying is that it's impossible for God to have a beginning because of His omnipotent attribute, is that He is immaterial and can create the material. So therefore, A and B can't come into existence simultaneously of each other, because absolute nothingness implies absolute randomness. So,
no, it doesn't.
Yes, it does.
Define nothing.
Absolute nothingness means no particulars, no thing.
So what is random? It also includes no randomness.
But if you hang on, so are you,
in an absence of absolutely everything, you don't have the possibility of probability or random chance. Absolutely everything is gone in nothingness. Also, I wanted to get back to one thing that you had mentioned, because I still think this idea, when you talked about the particulars of the God being infinite, having infinite energy, and also being infinite in a physical way, I still think is bonkers.
Hang on. I want to stay on point of this absolute nothingness. If something came into existence and prior to that was absolute nothingness,
right?
That would be absolute randomness, a miracle, correct?
Well, that's the thing. I don't know that it would actually be random, but since we're dealing with absolute nothingness and then something appears, I don't know what we would call that. But given that you hang on, I don't believe in some kind of creation ex nihilo kind of thing. But what I do wonder is, you believe that this God exists. What did He make the universe out of?
The mechanism He used?
No, the substance. What did He make us out of?
He's immaterial.
So did He just
immaterial? And then,
so it's Himself. We're made out of Him.
No, look, I addressed this earlier. Is that the only explanation? Is that it requires a consciousness to make more material.
But in order to have the material, you need the energy. The energy and matter are interchangeable. So He made the universe out of His energy, which is also Him. It's His energy. Does that sound like kind of where you're going?
Look, I need to play this out. So God is an internal consciousness, and He can create things
out of
instantly.
What? Out of what?
Just through his will.
Out of
That
nothing.
we can test this ourselves.
So you're saying that you don't believe that things can come from nothing, but you believe God can make stuff out of nothing. Is that what you're saying?
That is a brute fact, because when something comes into existence, it comes into existence instantly. There is no gradual process.
Again, I'm asking you, and this is a true dichotomy, either all that energy that's becoming matter is coming from God and is part of God, or God is making reality out of nothing. Which one is it?
No. Would you agree, when something comes into existence, it comes into existence instantly? That is a brute fact.
What are you talking about? What things coming into existence?
When God created energy and matter, all that energy and matter came into existence instantly.
Out of what? You are now making an argument that instead of God being the energy from which matter can be created, that God created energy and therefore matter out of something independent of himself from nothing. He conjured it up out of nothing that existed prior to that, to themselves. You are arguing for creation ex nihilo, when you just told me before that it is incoherent to believe that something can come from nothing. But it's not incoherent for this being to create stuff out of nothing. You have contradicted yourself again.
No, but that is not incoherent. If you take the position that we are living in God's consciousness, what does that
have to do with the fact that you have jumped from the claim that this universe could not come from nothing when I gave you an out? I gave you a mechanism, because we had talked about this before. God could be infinitely physical if physical and matter are just interchangeable. So if God is infinite energy, he can use that energy to create an infinite amount of stuff. So the universe could be created out of essentially just aspects of his own energy output. But you didn't bite on that. Instead, you then switched and said, no, what's happening instead is that God created the energy and the matter. I asked you initially, what did he make the universe out of? You then basically took a long time saying he made it out of energy and matter, and are now saying that no, the universe wasn't created from nothing. It was created from energy and matter, which it turns out your God created from nothing.
When you visualize a red car, how do you know that that image of that red car is in your mind or outside of your physical body?
Oh my God, are you serious?
Yes.
That's
the mechanism that God creates things. He creates things outside of himself, and we can test this by visualizing an image.
So
I can visualize.
God has thoughts.
Yes.
And those thoughts become physically real.
Yes.
By what mechanism? How are they becoming? It's one thing to say that he thought it up. Is he producing the reality of the vision in his head out of his energy?
We can test this ourselves.
You can test the God to see if he's conjuring things up.
No, we can test the mechanism that God uses to create things by visualizing an image, and we can test his eternal attribute by having dreams.
What Sunday school did you go to get that half-assed explanation of how God creates stuff? You still haven't answered the very real problem. I don't care that God. I will concede to this part of your argument that God has the capacity to visualize things before he creates them. I've asked you multiple times, when it comes time to actually create them, you're basically saying, no, that's enough for God. They just poof, come into existence. Out of what? You stated that the universe could not have come, quote, from nothing. But you're saying that in this case, there is no physical substance that things are coming from. God is dreaming them up and they become real. How?
No. Well, hang on. I've already addressed absolute nothingness as a starting point is a fallacy, because if absolute nothingness created an infinite structure of matter, that infinite structure of matter still requires an immaterial cause to get you stars and planets.
But the immaterial cause that you are asserting is now creating stuff out of nothing.
But I can demonstrate it.
No,
That's
you can't.
just
You've given me a sloppy analogy that if I close my eyes, I can picture a Ferrari.
no,
That
but
doesn't make the. Do you think that if you close your eyes and imagine that there is an Aston Martin sitting outside your house, what is the probability that that is actually the case in reality versus just
no,
something you pictured in your mind?
no, no. I'm talking about visualizing an image with your eyes open. I can visualize the color red, and it is outside of my physical body.
No, you're talking about observing the color red, right?
Well, yeah, but we are not omnipotent to sustain that image. Only God is
Are you
omnipotent
talking
to.
about seeing something that's red? Or are you talking about imagining an item that is red? Because you're using
Yeah,
visualizing, but you're not. I'm not. Are you visualizing it as in you are imagining it, or you're dreaming it, or are you visualizing it that you are physically observing it with your eyes? Which one?
yeah, imagining it or visualizing it, picturing it.
Okay, you're not
That's
doing that with your eyes. You're doing that with your brain.
But yeah, we are a living
But you
consciousness.
said that this was an example for how God could make something real. That's not an analogy. At no point is it even conceivable for us to take something that we picture in our heads and believe that it's going to physically become real in our reality. That is literally
Uh,
poofing something out of our brain into reality, out of thin air, out of nothing. So
Because
you're asserting that your God creates stuff out of his dreams.
no, I have to bring the Bible into this. So in Genesis 1:1, God created the heavens and the earth. And then Genesis 1:2, the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the water. So he created a planet Earth outside of himself while still being um, in the same proximity of planet Earth. And we can test this by visualizing an
He's an
image with our eyes.
he's an omnipresent being. What does the proximity of Earth have to do with an omnipresent being? How does an omnipresent being, spirit, hover over the face of the waters when it exists in all time and in all space? It fills up everything.
Look, that's another brute fact. Is that an infinite God is necessary because he is infinite in size.
Got it. How is he in one place at a time? You said that you said something about the earth being in a direction related to him. He's an infinite being. He's omnipresent. The earth isn't located anywhere adjacent to him, away from him, or within him. He's everywhere. So that concept is irrational.
How is it irrational?
If you have a being that exists everywhere, nothing is away from it or close to it. Everything is close to it because it is by definition everywhere. That's what it means to be omnipresent.
Yeah, but going to Genesis, it talks about darkness. So outside the universe, well, the planet Earth is the darkness, which we have no way of measuring without alluding to energy and matter. So that darkness would just be an abstract thought of God's mind, like the peripheral vision of God's mind.
Okay,
And
I want to ask you this. Do you think that the authors of the books of Genesis were putting out a scientific book?
there is science in Genesis, yes.
No.
Yeah, the laws of thermodynamics. Energy
Did
can't
did
create
the
more.
authors of the book of Genesis understand the laws of thermodynamics?
Well, look,
If you
they
say,
had
if you,
Moses had,
what
but look,
did Moses have access to future knowledge?
hang
Future
on,
knowledge, but my perspective, human perspective, that is.
but we are jumping to theology now.
Well, no, we're also getting. I'm pretty sure at this point you're going to get outside the realm of even history. Moses didn't write Genesis, so that's automatically. I mean, that's just not a
No,
thing.
Genesis 1:1 proves the Bible, and to elaborate on this,
How does Genesis? if Genesis 1:1 proves quote unquote the Bible, which one? The Hebrew Bible, or are you wrapping in the New Testament too? And if
No,
it's proving the New Testament,
the
how does it?
Torah.
Okay, so it proves the Torah is true. How?
Because only the God of the Bible meets the prerequisites to be outside the laws of logic. More specifically, the law of identity and the law of non-contradiction, because he created a finite in size planet Earth.
What does this
Which
have to do
makes
with the book of Genesis?
hang on, hang on, give me some time with this. So he is ad infinitum, making him outside the law of non-contradiction.
So he can contradict himself.
No, because matter is not eternal.
But you said that he was outside that law. Are you saying that God can do things that violate those laws?
No, because he is one. He is.
Then why did you just say that? Why did you say that he is not confined by the law of non-contradiction? You just said that.
No, because if matter were eternal and the immaterial were eternal, well then this is a contradiction because A is B at the same time A is not B.
You're saying that only one. Wait, whoa! I want to put a pause on that right there. Are you saying that if matter is eternal, it can't be the case that energy is also eternal? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying if matter is eternal, God cannot be that false God is contingent on the laws of logic, on an outside particular making the observation that there is a contradiction with this false God. So the one true God would be outside the laws of logic because the God of the Bible created matter outside of himself. So therefore, because he created matter outside of himself, this debunks all other religions who hold to eternal matter. So now this puts you to a starting point to energy and matter. And because Genesis 1:1 got it correct from the very first sentence, this puts the Bible as the perfect starting point in any theological discussion.
Except that most of what the origin story that's being put forth in the Genesis narrative is not unique to the Bible. It's borrowing from other ancient Near Eastern traditions. It actually has echoes of old Babylonian stories like Tiamat and Marduk. So the fact that it even has similar motifs built into it. This notion that the Bible's laid this out, no, that's just not the case, and it's not the first one. Other stories have hit on these tropes, especially chaos realms of water, all this other kind of stuff. There's nothing in the book of Genesis that proves the point that all the book of Genesis does is assert essentially what you're doing, that God said, let there be light, created the earth, and created the universe, right? As far as that goes, that's everything. But when you're now here telling me, and you keep doing this with the matter and energy kind of thing, I have asked you multiple times about this, because you keep trying to set up these weird things and you're asserting that they're true dichotomies. I asked you before about matter and energy being interchangeable, and you agreed. If you've got a being that is an infinite source of energy and can create a universe, it stands to reason that he can produce an infinite amount of matter, because that energy is infinite, so he can create infinite matter. That just follows from that, right?
Yeah, but Genesis 1:1, God created a planet Earth. So he created matter. And then in Genesis 1:3, God said, let there be light. And because matter can't create more energy, energy requires an outside source. So you need, in order for photosynthesis...
But in your worldview, there is no energy. Energy is God. The only way your worldview is going to work is if the energy you're talking about is emanating directly from that God. If you're trying to say that he hit a switch and made energy and then hit another switch and created matter, that doesn't make sense, because now I can go back to my previous question. Out of what did he make them? And if you say his daydreams, I swear to God.
What other explanation is there?
Your belief is that God dreamt up the world and created something from nothing. That's your belief. Okay. So you believe in creation ex nihilo.
We can demonstrate this ourselves by
You cannot demonstrate that a thought can become physical reality.
Well, how do you know that the image in your mind is truly there? We are seeing an image outside of ourselves
But
and
that's very different than saying I can make the image that I'm picturing inside my head an actual physical reality. I can imagine sitting in a room that is flooded with $1,000 bills. I can't make that physically happen. You agree with that, right? Or do you believe in magic?
Hang on, but because we are finite, we don't have the capacity to sustain an image.
Do you understand now? You were still engaging in special pleading. So we can't do this, but hold that analogy in your head. Now imagine that you had a God that could do what you're saying, picture an idea and then make it real. Perfect. I get that. What's he making it out of? It went from being an image in his head to being something that exists in a physical reality. And you and I both agree, at least to an extent, because you are a flat earther, that some of this stuff can be empirically proven. We can experience it. We can touch it. We can measure it. It has weight, right? Some of those things are real. How did you get from the image in your head or the image in God's head to something very real? What did he make it out of?
Well, then that's something you have to ask God when you meet him. But
that's a weird dodge, man. Because
the
whole point of this is that the cosmogony, you're trying to say that this conclusively proves in a very logical way that God's necessary for the creation of the universe and everything that we know. If what you're saying is true, right? Let's say that I concede absolutely everything that you're saying here, right? That is the case. Do you understand the theological implications of the corner you've painted yourself in? If God is required for absolutely everything in reality, nothing can happen except stuff that he has imagined in his own mind. That means murder, rape, deception, theft, slavery are things that God conceived of in his mind. Those are actions his creatures can engage in a reality he dreamt up. You have made your God responsible for every tiny moment of evil in the world. And if you try to say that he's somehow allowing evil, you're going to have to argue for a concept or a reality or some kind of particular that exists independent from him. So please.
No, how would you explain when you visualize an image and it appears in front of you? How would you explain the gap in between the gap?
What are you talking about?
In relation to God's mechanism on how he creates things, it goes from an immaterial
this is the first time I've heard somebody hold to this in a more or less literal way. So if you're asking me, how do I reconcile your process? I'm asking you what God makes this stuff out of, and you haven't given me a straight answer. So don't ask me to fix the problem for you. I already did about 20 minutes ago. I started to try to actually do something that I think you could have used and run with. That God is the infinite source of energy.
Well, then what is the image that we can visualize? What is that made up of?
What do you mean? Do you think that it exists as a physical thing?
No, but it's immaterial or physical. It's still there. It's still an image. Like the law of identity. A is A.
Okay. Okay. Hang on. I'm gonna bring this up now because there's two things that are happening here that you are tap dancing around. One, you seem to be wanting to avoid the idea that God is responsible for evil, and two, as a flat earther, you as a Christian probably should understand that you are denying a very real theological tenet, and that is the idea of God's natural revelation. You don't believe that the earth is an oblate spheroid, so therefore, and we have empirical proof that this is how God made the world, which you deny.
Are you asking, is God evil?
I'm not asking if God's evil. I'm saying based on what you're establishing, the parameters that you are setting up for your God means that he's responsible for the entirety of reality. It cannot be the case that he's not responsible for all of it because of the dimensions that you've given him and the way you've described how all of this is dependent on him, which means evil is as well.
Well, our existence here on Earth is finite. But if you're
which is also part of his design. He made death. He made life, he made death, he made time, he made space, he made goodness and family, and he made war and violence and rape and murder. He made all of those things. By definition, according to the way you're setting up your little creation story, it follows that it must be the case that all this stuff comes from God. Therefore, evil comes from God.
Well, he created a world. He would have looked at all possibilities, and he created a world to extract the most love out of people. But to go back prior to the creation of energy and matter, God was independent from the start. Therefore, he has no one to be evil towards. So that puts God to being good by default. But
no, it doesn't. How does that follow? If God, here's the thing, if God is good by default, if you just declare him to be good, I would say that that's true. That would mean that murder and rape and slavery are not bad by definition. They're only bad if people do them because God decided to interact with us, according to some of the narratives in your book, and say, I don't want you doing those things. I don't think it's appropriate for you to be killing other people. It doesn't matter if God kills people. Based on the thing that you're talking about right now, setting up this entire scenario, evil is the responsibility of your creator God. Anything else that you're going to try, if you're going to try to argue that it's somehow a special case, this weird limited thing, it's a kink in man's creation, that kink, that aberration, that deviation cannot, by definition, exist outside of God's direct control, according to your argument.
Well, you're missing a key point here, is that God is eternal, so he can see the futures of people.
So evil doesn't really mean anything for him.
Well, in relation to Noah's, I'm assuming you're talking about Noah's flood. Why?
No, I'm talking about standards of morality and the problem of evil, but I'm not talking about the specific problem of evil. I'm talking about if evil exists in a universe that God is entirely responsible for creating, if absolutely nothing in our reality can come from anything without God say so, God is, by definition, it necessarily follows, God is responsible for evil. It can't be any other way based on the way that you're kind of laying the stuff out, unless you want to say that God is not responsible for absolutely everything in the creation of the universe, and then that opens up lots more implications and lots more problems for you.
Yeah, but God, just to reiterate, God created a world to extract the most love out of people, and in order to identify what love is,
can we demonstrate that though? We can track that, right?
Well,
so when God's energy is moving through the universe and it's moving over our earth and moving within and without it, when the Holocaust occurred, or a genocide in Cambodia, or people dying from starvation or famines, but actually we'll leave those ones out because those are more circumstantial tragedies rather than acts of blatant human cruelty. God made that. He made the people that were involved in it. Yes, he did. He couldn't have not made it based on what you've laid out. How can you say that the universe is entirely dependent upon God, but his energy is somehow flowing through all this stuff, but then he's just not responsible for what people do? He's not responsible for the concepts that are supposedly bad. Now, if you're going to argue that none of that stuff actually is bad, I would do that, because God, by definition, is omnibenevolent, right? So anything that occurs from God, if he wipes out a bunch of people, or if he magically makes 1 million people appear someplace else, all of those things are good. God can't commit murder because God's a creator, right? But when you try to establish this idea of good and evil amongst human beings, good and evil now become completely subjective. So the only way that you can have good and evil morality in the world that you're talking about is if it's entirely subjective to the way human beings treat each other. If you're going to say that goodness is something that God's got and evil is something that people just get into and muck themselves up with, you can't do that while simultaneously claiming that absolutely everything in the universe comes from God. You just can't.
No, but I wouldn't say that God is omnibenevolent. In First John, it says that God is love. It doesn't say that He is all loving, but but
Again,
He is good.
that's not going to my point. Where is evil coming from in your
The
worldview?
evil is God is not control the freedom of choice. People are choosing to commit evil.
How do they have a freedom to choose? Choice came from God.
Be-
Our minds
no,
came from God.
the knowledge
Yes.
the knowledge of love comes evil, and the knowledge of evil comes love.
But you understand that
The,
all of that is dependent upon God. That entire
yes, because
system and relationship is based on God's design. He's responsible for good. I didn't say that he's all bad. That's not
yeah,
my point. I'm saying he created evil. He's responsible for the good and he's responsible for the bad by definition. He has to be, if I'm going to concede to your worldview. You said he created absolutely everything. Nothing can happen without that conscious being, that transcendent being, creating it. Evil comes from him.
no, he created a true dichotomy that it's either one or you could either choose one or the other. But the knowledge of
Do
love
you think that's
comes.
how morality works then? Okay,
People
let me give you
choose
an
to be.
example. Let me give you an example. Let's say I'm sitting on a park bench, right? Or something like that. But I'm sitting on a bench waiting for a bus, right? And an elderly woman comes out of a bank behind me and she walks up. Now, I have the ability, I can do a couple of different things here, right? I have, according to you, let's set up a true, what you think is a true dichotomy. I can either help her onto the bus or I can throw her underneath it. One is good, the other is bad. But it's not a true dichotomy because I can do nothing. I can just sit on the bench and watch her go about her way. This notion somehow that when God created all this stuff, oh, people have free choice, and so they can get into things that are bad. The only way that I can do a bad thing is because I exist within the parameters of the universe that He created. The concept of murder and deception and theft and all these other horrible things comes from God. You can't give Him just the good stuff and say the bad stuff came from people, unless you want to conjure up either an evil God with similar powers or give us the capacity of doing something equivalent to an evil God.
A God cannot be evil because He is independent from the start. He has no one to be evil towards.
I didn't say
Even if
that,
no,
my
hang
man,
on,
I did not, no, Philip, I did not say that God was evil. I said He made it. I went on at great length talking about how He is omnibenevolent, right? Even if He wasn't omnibenevolent, even if he for whatever reason, because you tried to throw that, I'm like, well, no, John says God is love, whatever. The definition usually given that He's omnibenevolent. If He is omnibenevolent, there is a certain direction you can take that in, and that is everything He does by definition is good. When He flooded the earth and killed everybody but Noah's family, that was by definition a good thing for Him to do. I'm not making the argument that God is evil. I'm making the argument from following your explanation that He made evil. He's responsible for it. He has to be. You've made it dependent upon Him.
no, because he is good by default, but He has the knowledge of evil as well. So even if God was evil,
So
He
how
is
does He have the
choosing to
knowledge
be
of
evil.
how does He have the knowledge of something He didn't make? Everything comes from Him. Where did those ideas come from?
Because only love can come by choice. There has
Does
to
love
be a
exist?
second.
Does love exist independent of God?
No, the God's aseity secures his
So
love. His
God made love.
no, God is love from the start.
Even better. So evil has to come from Him.
No, but the knowledge of evil, because the brute fact is he is either one of the two from the start. But what logically follows is that he is
He can't.
good.
He
But hang
can't
on,
be. He can't be one of the two other things if he's the only thing from the jump. Come on
no,
now, man.
no, love and hate is just like energy and matter. They convert into another. So
And it turns out
God,
that energy and matter are things that are completely dependent upon God,
no,
just
but
like love and hate.
No, but what logically follows is that God is God is good by default because He has no one to be evil towards from the start. If God was evil from the start, that would invoke
I am not
a
arguing
second
again.
particular.
No, I'm going to step on your feet on this one, and we're going to wrap this up. I did not make the argument that God was evil. You keep running back to that. I did not say that God was evil. I was making a stronger case for an understanding of God's omnibenevolence than even that you're attempting to make. You're
He's
trying to
not.
weasel. I'm not making. I want you. I'm going to say this again. I am not making the argument that he is evil. I'm making the argument that by definition, one, if he's omnibenevolent, he can't be categorized as evil. However, the evil that we see in the universe around him, based on the parameters that you are asserting, must be the case for the creation of the universe. That evil must come from your God.
No, what I'm gathering here is that you're asking, why doesn't God intervene with the evil in the world?
No, I'm not asking that. I'm not asking that at all. It doesn't matter to me if God intervenes in tragedies or human cruelty. I'm not saying that at all. Again, I am not arguing that your God or any God is bad or a bad guy. I'm arguing that evil, the kind of evil that we can get up to as human beings, by definition, must originate with that God. If we have the capacity for love, it's because God made love, or God is love. If I have the capacity to hate, it follows that hatred must come from God. That greed and evil and all these other kinds of things, those concepts, the reason that you and I have the ability to make the quote unquote the wrong choice, the bad decision, the mean move, is because God put that in there. It can't be any other way based on what you're talking about, the way that you've set this up.
The knowledge of evil doesn't make you evil.
I didn't say he was evil. Philip, we've got to wrap this up because you're not, at this point, you're talking to yourself.
No, I'm saying the knowledge of evil, which would come from God, doesn't make you as the individual evil.
Okay, so then now you're acknowledging that evil exists because God made it. If I have knowledge of anything, it's because God made it.
It logically follows is that love, the law of polarity, that the opposite of love is evil. And so, but that doesn't mean that God created.
But God can't. But you've ignored what I'm talking about. I not only did not make the claim that God is evil, I made the claim that he is all good. You and I don't disagree on that. Actually, we did, because you don't believe in omnibenevolence, I think, was sort of what you said. I am not arguing for an evil being. If there is a concept of good and of evil, it follows that those concepts came from God, and that's how we know about them. If you want to say that God is love and all this good stuff, and whatever happens to be the opposite of that is just something mankind cooked up in their imaginations, those imaginations are also the product of God. If you're trying to say that evil is somehow independently arrived at by contingent creatures that God made, you are making a very different claim about those kinds of things than you were making about literally all the things in the universe. Because everything in the universe you believe is dependent on God. But now you are tap dancing away from evil being his bag. And it is. It has to be.
No, but people are choosing to be evil. God is not forcing people to be evil.
The only reason they have the capacity to conceive of evil is because their ability to have conceptions themselves, and conceptions of evil ideas are dependent on God. Literally everything in the universe, you said, depends on God. He created
the knowledge
everything.
Of facts.
So there's certain kinds of knowledge that are, if there's certain kinds of knowledge that are independent of God, you now have a problem, because that God has knowledge of something outside of himself that we can also tap into.
No, but it doesn't say that God is omnibenevolent. That would imply that he is absolutely love with no knowledge, like
no,
evil
it doesn't
wouldn't even exist.
Omnibenevolent does not imply that God is not all love or all loving. It does not imply that. I'm sorry if you think that does not track. Omnibenevolent, in the case that I'm using, it simply means that God, as a creator being, exists in a moral standard that does not comport with anything that we get involved in. He is all good by definition. Whatever he does, if he destroys all of reality or recreates a new one or makes a multiverse, whatever his decision, it's all good because he's God. But that doesn't mean anything for us. in terms of how we relate to morality or evil or any of these other kinds of things. But if a morality exists for humans, a right way for us to behave according to that same God, that morality and all the concepts surrounding it originated with God, which means their opposites do as well.
But when you choose to do something, is that God controlling you, or is that you as the individual making that choice?
But there's a third option. What if
What's the third option?
you're under the influence of sin, my man? You've been seduced by Satan. Or do you not believe that that's in the Bible? That's in the scriptures. It's not one or the other. I know you love true dichotomies, but it's not just like that. You're just asserting that there's two possibilities. I made a bad choice, or God made me do something naughty. No, the third choice is, and lots of Christians believe this, was that your sin nature, Calvinists love this, without regeneration by the Holy Spirit, you can't help but do anything bad. Even the good stuff that you do doesn't count as good because it wasn't being done with a regenerated heart. Now, if you believe, like a lot of other Christians do, that Satan is actively tempting you with things, then Satan could be influencing you to make those incorrect decisions.
Yeah, so it's the legacy. Yeah, it's the knowledge of evil. That's the legacy of Lucifer, is that we know what...
Now you're positing another being to be responsible for evil. This is the classic theological issue, right? God made everything and he made it good. And then he also has some angels and stuff. And there's this one angel broke bad and then got into that's where and evil sort of originates from his initial rebellion or an interaction between Satan and Adam and Eve and this horrible thing that happened.
No, the devil, the fall of Lucifer was necessary before the creation of humans because God wanted to title Lucifer as evil.
So God's responsible for evil.
No, Lucifer.
You're just removing this. You're just removing this by a few steps, my man. You still haven't dealt with the central problem of your original formulation. It doesn't matter if Lucifer's around, if there's angels, or how this interacts. We're just getting into the weeds of a Christian narrative. Your initial statement, based on your strange understanding of cosmogony, is that the universe must create everything. It's not just the universe and then some of the stuff in it. It's literally all things had to be created by your God. That means he's responsible for all of those things. And that's a poor way of putting it. They're all dependent on him. That includes the good things and the bad things from our perspective. The only thing that I've basically said is that from God's perspective, good things and bad things really don't matter. It's a God. It's an omnipotent, infinite, transcendent being that knows everything. Good and bad would get a little fuzzy with a being like that.
What I'm still getting out of this is that you're asking, well, why doesn't God do something about this evil? Why doesn't he not intervene?
No, I'm not. When did I ask that question?
Well, then that's what follows from your premise. Is that
it doesn't. I didn't say anything about that. What follows from my present, but from my standing, is that good and bad things can happen from this particular being, and he doesn't necessarily have to be involved one way or the other. That's what follows. I never said he was bad. And I didn't say anything about whether or not he intervenes when things go bad.
But look, to summarize this, is that we choose to be evil. The knowledge of evil derives from God.
But you only have that choice because evil is there for you to choose.
No, but it's how are you defining evil? Evil is an abstract thought. It's not an actual physical thing.
But the universe was created out of abstract thoughts in the mind of a God. You believe that. So how did those abstract thoughts get into the heads of his contingent creatures? They're also the responsibility of God. They exist because he created everything in the universe. You keep appealing to something outside of us or outside of God in a weird way. You are trying to weasel this thing in to a double standard. It cannot be the case that your God created absolutely everything, but then there's some other stuff there that we can decide doesn't have anything to do with God's act of creation. It doesn't follow.
He didn't create evil. The knowledge of evil is eternal. This comports with Romans 1 verse 20 is that God, since the creation of the world, God has made his invisible attributes known to everybody.
Dude,
His eternal power, divine nature. So
you
those
don't
are
even
without
need you
excuse.
don't even need to go to the scriptures. You set the claim up. The universe and everything in it, all of reality is dependent on that God. That God. You don't have the ability to choose things that God did not allow you to experience. We only have the options available in the world that He has created for us, based on your understanding. This is your worldview. I'm trying to put myself in your worldview and live in it. That means, by implication, everything that we experience, both good and bad, because it's happening within this universe, because it's dependent on God, He made all of it. It does not follow from that makes God evil or good. It just makes evil something that's dependent on God in the first place.
Well, and even if I grant, well, let's play this out. If I grant you that God created evil, how does that refute His existence, the God of the Bible?
What? Can you repeat that question?
If God created evil, or however you want to phrase it, if I grant you that, how does that refute the existence of God, the God of the Bible?
It doesn't. It just points out something that I think gets really inconsistent about these claims. The absolutist claim that this universe had to be created by that consciousness, it then follows from that. That doesn't get you out of a lot of uncomfortable implications. And to me, the most uncomfortable, inconvenient implication for a Christian is that if you believe that the entire universe and everything within reality was created by this God, that includes the bad stuff as well. And if you try to get away from that by saying, well, no, because we're responsible for different things and we can make bad choices. Sure, we can make bad choices. Maybe free will is a thing. Maybe it's not all deterministic like the Calvinists believe. It's actually the Arminian case where, I make choices, like I choose to be saved or choose to recognize salvation or something like that. But the only reason that those options are there, that those ideas and those concepts are banging around, is because they're dependent on a universe that He created. And by necessity, you're stating that by necessity, it must be the case that this universe and this reality was created by Him. And now you're trying to backpedal away from the implications of it.
But if you extrapolate this back to Adam and Eve, humans are born with a sinful nature because of Adam and Eve. So they ate from the tree of good and evil.
A tree created by God, and they were influenced by a being created by God. And they were using ideas and communications created by God. And it turns out they needed to do that in order to, according to Christians, fulfill a set of covenants that would result in Jesus appearing and dying for man's sins. All of this was necessary. Evil was necessary for the narrative that you hold to. So I don't understand why you're giving me friction with this.
Yeah, evil is necessary for there to be love, an understanding of love.
So God made it.
No, the knowledge of evil.
Okay, so God made the knowledge of evil. Sorry.
No, He didn't make it.
Then what is it about evil that you can know if it's not something that came from God? Everything in the universe is created by God. So if this thing is something that wasn't created by God, but I have knowledge of it, where is it?
But God's aseity secures all facts. He didn't.
And one of those facts is that. And one of those facts is I can murder someone. You could be a rapist or a serial killer or just somebody who likes to set fires. Right? Yeah, those are bad behaviors for humans to engage in. That's something that if you can do something bad in this universe and the universe is dependent on God, I don't understand why you're having a problem with this, other than the fact that you seem to think that I'm hanging this kind of stuff, and I am doing that. I'm hanging that on God because this is my issue with these kinds of explanations. You're perfectly fine in coming at a skeptic and saying, no, it must be the case that all of this stuff comes from a God. Okay, well, that includes the bad stuff as well. And now you're slamming on the brakes saying that, no, the definition of evil is somehow different. It's not evil, it's the knowledge of evil. You're just asserting things to establish a double standard here. That's all you're doing. And I think with that, we can probably wrap up the conversation.
Yeah, I'll just say one more thing, and then
sure,
we'll just give closings. If someone commits, like, just say someone murders someone, and you don't know that it's evil, right? So then God had to make evil known to everybody for us to identify what is good and bad. He made the knowledge of evil known, the consequences known to everybody. But he is not forcing people, he is not controlling people to commit murder. It's just the knowledge of evil that he has made known to everybody.
That knowledge is still something he made. And the only way people can behave within those parameters is because of the environment that he made. He made an environment where you can choose to commit murder or lie or any other things that we would label evil. They're not necessarily, again, definitionally, they're not necessarily evil for him, because as a creator God, none of that stuff applies to him. He could smash us all to bits. He made us. He can do that. It's not like if he breaks it, he bought it. He already built it, so he can smash it to pieces. That's not evil for him to do. I'm not one of these people that's going to come at you and say, when God flooded the world, he was a very bad guy. Now, if you are anthropomorphizing his motives, like a lot of Christians do, and call him a loving father and an all benevolent person, that becomes problematic, because that makes him a bad guy. You can't say that he's all love, and when he kills lots of people. That raises a lot of contradictions for lots of people, unless by love what you mean is that, well, he's all love in the sense that he's going to do whatever is best for himself and his creation, ultimately. Okay, maybe. But again, you have not addressed the core of my criticism, your claim, and it's just a chink in the armor here. But when you're trying to state this with so much certainty that it must be the case that the God that you're conceiving of, operating within its parameters, is the necessary precondition for all of reality, but evil somehow escapes that necessary connection, that's how I know you guys have not thought this through. That's how I know it doesn't follow.
Well, in relation to Noah's flood, God is eternal, so that can be justified because
for humans. What do you mean by God doesn't have to be justified? He can't be. Justice for that kind of being does not exist, right? You would agree with that. He transcends that. So saying that what God does is just, it wouldn't matter if God decided that everyone was good and then killed them all. It's still just from our perspective.
No,
we're the creation. Because we're the creation and he's the creator. Do you not get the creator-creation distinction?
But God, you can't assert that everybody was good.
I'm not asserting that everyone was good. I gave that as a hypothetical, my man. If everyone were good and he killed all of us anyway, he would still be justified in the sense that you're talking about. Justification doesn't apply to him. He's God. Justification only counts for people. Was it okay that you killed that person? Well, it was in self-defense. Okay, then it was a justified killing. God needs no justification. He created all life. He can snuff it out, regardless of what he thinks of it.
Yeah. Look, it's over an hour and a half. Do you have any other objections, or do you want to give a closing?
No, actually I do. We don't really need to give closings. If you just want to have like a final word, go right ahead. There are more objections to that on some of the physics stuff, but I don't want to get back into it since we have been going for over an hour and a half.
My last few words is that my YouTube channel is Phillip, Kornelis, Aman, and it's the same as my avatar. That would be my closing.
Okay, yeah, mine too. Well, thanks for coming on. It was an interesting discussion. I don't think that your particular argument is really good. I think it's got a lot of vague language in it. I think you need to kind of tighten that up. Maybe look into the issue about, because I'm not trying to corner you with problem of evil stuff, although that's kind of tangential to it. I'm just trying to fully extrapolate out the implications of the model that you're trying to give here. But yeah, I think it needs a little bit of work. But anyway, thanks for coming on, everyone. Thanks for joining in the live chat. We will talk to you all later. Have a good night.
Yeah, okay, thanks thanks for hosting. See you later.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. Take care. Everyone, good night.